In the previous spoiler, it was mentioned that Luo Feng unleashed astonishing combat power, successfully disrupting the enemy's rhythm and ultimately forcing him to abandon his encirclement. After escaping danger, the squad proceeded to an area with even fiercer battles and greater peril. Having witnessed Luo Feng's strength, one team member couldn't help but ask out of curiosity about the military merit quota the system had assigned to Luo Feng. To everyone's surprise, Luo Feng's merit quota had reached the upper limit of what a world master-level warrior could be taken. This meant even the virtual universe system acknowledged that he possessed the strength to confront an immortal army lord head-on. By comparison, although Rock's military merit quota was only 1/5 of Luo Feng's, it was still exceptionally high for a rookie soldier. However, what they didn't know was that this so-called upper limit also had its limitations. In fact, the Virtual Universe Company, intending to temper Luo Feng through life and death trials, had assigned him a military merit target with a difficulty level 10,000 times greater than standard military system. In other words, unless Luo Feng could accomplish this objective, he would not be allowed to leave the extraterritorial battlefield. Judging from his achievements in the Heavenly Bridge and Heavenly Mountain, the Universe Venerables responsible for assigning missions clearly wouldn't settle for Luo Feng merely matching an immortal army lord where they wanted him to slay one. And in fact, Luo Feng indeed had that ability. However, to Tai Wo and the others, just being able to contend with an immortal army lord as a world master was already extraordinarily rare. To defeat one would be a heaven-defying feat they had never considered, nor dared to imagine, that the young man before them possessed the strength to kill an immortal army lord or even defeat a lower-tier marquee immortal. If they knew that Luo Feng was none other than the famed Prince Luo Feng of the Virtual Universe Company, they would no doubt be utterly shocked. In fact, ever since stepping onto the battlefield, none of the enemies Luo Feng had encountered, whether the previous automaton immortal or the ambushers along the way, had managed to force him to go all out. He hadn't even bothered to use the level plate, which could massively enhance his flying speed. Fighting alongside his teammates may have appeared safe and steady on the surface, but in terms of accumulating military merit, it had actually significantly slowed down his pace. For this reason, Taiwo deliberately chose to lead the squad into a region with fiercer battles and more powerful opponents. Although the risks were higher, it would significantly improve the efficiency of gaining military merit. After all, rather than spending time killing 100 weak enemies, defeating a single powerful foe would yield far greater rewards. After several days of flight, Luo Feng and his squad finally arrived at the battle zone Taiwo had selected. In fact, the extraterritorial battlefield was a war zone jointly established by Universe Venerables from all the major races. During its formation, as their divine power swept across the region unchecked, nearly all the native lifeforms on the planets within this starfield were wiped out. Many planets were even forcibly shattered, reduced to floating debris and swirling dust. This perfectly echoed what the Primal Chaos City leader once said: race wars aren't about right or wrong, but purely about the survival and advancement of one's own kind. Taiwo had chosen this particular area because it was littered with planetary fragments, which could serve as natural cover and temporary hiding spots for rest. This environment attracted numerous powerful fighters and frequent combat, making it one of the most dangerous regions within the entire 7th battlefield. Over countless ages, countless warriors had perished here, and the accumulated killing intent had long since condensed into a terrifying aura of death that made one's heart tremble. However, that oppressive aura had no effect on Luo Feng. After undergoing the baptism of the ancient god ruins on Blood River continent, coupled with numerous assassination attempts and life or death trials, he had long grown accustomed to constant slaughter and the ever-present pressure of battle. Even the golden-horned beast's natural bloodthirst and brutality remained undisturbed. In contrast, Rock, who was participating in the race war for the first time, was visibly tense and uneasy. Thrust into such a high-risk area, he remained on edge at all times. Eventually, following advice from his seniors, he diverted a trace of his consciousness into the virtual universe and used gaming to temporarily relax his mind, helping to avoid excessive anxiety. Before setting out, Taiwo specifically established contact with several nearby elite human squads to avoid being left isolated in the event of a sudden ambush. After the team finished organizing and taking a brief rest, they officially departed, beginning their search for alien targets to eliminate. What surprised Luo Feng and Rock was that Taiwo, despite being an immortal-level powerhouse, chose to pilot a low-performance C-grade spaceship. Perspective changes with one's status, especially after Luo Feng became the direct disciple of the Primal Chaos City leader. With higher-level access, he naturally gained exposure to more core resources, and his knowledge expanded significantly. Once upon a time, A C-grade spaceship was already a luxury for Luo Feng when he had just entered the universe. But now, with his special position in the virtual universe company, C-grade spaceships were hardly worth mentioning. So when Taiwo took out a C-grade spaceship, it seemed highly mismatched with his status and almost out of place. However, the truth wasn't so simple. In a high-risk area like the extraterritorial battlefield, whether it's a C-grade or a higher performance, more expensive E-grade spaceship, all are prone to ambushes and damage. By comparison, C-grade spaceships are cheap, and though their performance is inferior, it's enough for routine travel. Most importantly, they are easy to mass-produce. For an immortal level being, commissioning tens of thousands or even millions of them is not difficult. Even if they're destroyed in battle, it's nothing to grieve over. What's truly expensive and worth protecting is the modular, detachable rest chamber made of F-grade metal, and the high-end detection devices that far surpass even C9-grade spaceships in value and can determine the outcome of a battle. As for the detection system Taiwo was currently using, it naturally couldn't compare to the top-tier equipment Luo Feng had specially purchased before entering the battlefield. Thus, when Luo Feng quietly activated his own detector, Taiwo remained completely unaware. After several days of fruitless travel, Taiwo suddenly sensed the divine power fluctuations of a few immortal-level beings and immediately ordered the spaceship's AI to turn back and retreat. After all, if the enemy really consisted of a few immortal-level powerhouses, charging in would be nothing short of suicide. If Luo Feng currently had the permission to act alone, he would never choose to retreat. For him, hunting World Master-level enemies was easy, but the accumulation of military merits through such kills was extremely inefficient. However, under military regulations, he was not allowed to leave the squad without authorization until completing the system-assigned military merit quota. Although Luo Feng found this somewhat frustrating, he was still willing to assist the squad and gain real combat experience before completing his task, as it was still a rare chance for tempering himself. Don't forget, Luo Feng possessed the combat strength of a king immortal. A mere few immortal army lords, even if led by a marquis immortal, could hardly pose a real threat to him. Some might wonder, why rule out the possibility that a king immortal is leading the enemy? That's because, on the extraterritorial battlefield, king immortals are already considered the top-tier combat power. According to the agreement between all races, beings above universe venerable level are strictly forbidden from intervening directly in the extraterritorial battlefield. As such, logistical bases are only required to have defenses capable of withstanding universe venerable attacks but not the strength of universe masters. It is worth mentioning that even a combined strike from tens of thousands of king immortals still couldn't match the power of a universe master. Therefore, unless it's a special treasure hunting mission or a siege by overwhelming forces, king immortals typically fight alone and rarely team up with lower-tier immortals. This also means that the enemy now appearing, while strong, is still within Luo Feng's manageable range. After several days of cautious travel, Taiwo finally detected a viable target. Though still several million kilometers away, the veterans were able to identify the enemy's race and faction affiliation at a glance just from the detection image. Luo Feng, too, used the inherited memories from the golden horned beast to access a wealth of relevant data and quickly assess the situation. Seizing the moment when the enemy was completely unprepared, Taiwo immediately condensed his immortal divine power and launched a surprise attack. The enemy only consisted of several World Master-level fighters, and in the face of an immortal's assault, even if the direct strike missed, the explosive shockwaves alone were enough to severely wound them. Although the enemies desperately avoided fatal blows, they were quickly overwhelmed in their injured state and completely wiped out. The strongest among them, a team leader at the level of a World Master General, was finally killed after struggling to withstand several of Taiwo's powerful blows. The moment the battle ended, Taiwo immediately ordered the looting of spoils and called for an urgent retreat. According to battlefield survival protocols, any battle that cannot be concluded within a few minutes must be ended and retreated from at once. Otherwise, if enemy reinforcements arrive, even a winning situation could be instantly reversed, putting the team in grave danger. To Luo Feng, this ambush posed no challenge at all. He even chuckled silently at the military merits he earned from it. The military merit gained from killing such a weak squad amounted to just 1/10,000,000th of his target. At this rate, it would take him millions of years on the extraterritorial battlefield to meet the requirement. It's important to remember that military regulations cannot be violated. Even though Luo Feng's power had long surpassed the World Master level, he still had to strictly follow the rules and complete the mission step by step. What he truly longed for was to encounter a top-tier elite squad composed of powerful enemies. Only then could he rapidly accumulate enough military merits. And this was precisely the true purpose behind the military merit assessment set by the virtual universe company's upper echelon. They wanted Luo Feng to step onto a battlefield soaked in blood and fire, to face immortal-level opponents head-on using his own strength and even to slay them. As the direct disciple of the primal Chaos City leader, the expectations placed upon him naturally far surpassed those of other core-level geniuses. Back to the plot. As per usual practice, after each battle, the elite squad would divide the spoils according to each member's contribution, to avoid internal conflicts caused by disputes over gains. Captain Taiwo would pick an item of greatest value to himself first, and then allow the other members to choose in sequence. As a core world master of the virtual universe company and the direct disciple of the primal Chaos City leader, Luo Feng naturally had no interest in these spoils. Even though he had made the greatest contribution in the battle, he still voluntarily gave up his right to choose. The other team members were, of course, overjoyed. After all, a teammate who brought great military merits but didn't take a share of the loot was incredibly rare and valuable. Some even vaguely speculated that even if Luo Feng wasn't a nurtured genius of the 5 major factions, he must be the disciple of a peak-level powerhouse. A being who, while still only at the world master level, possessed immortal-level strength. How could he possibly be someone obscure or ordinary? After fighting alongside him multiple times, Luo Feng not only repeatedly saved teammates at critical moments, but also significantly reduced the risk of casualties, greatly boosting the squad's survival rate. As a result, his standing within the team steadily rose. In contrast, Rock seemed rather dejected. After all, where there are people, there are comparisons. Though he was highly talented and one of the most outstanding young world masters of his generation, under Luo Feng's brilliance, he appeared dim and ordinary. The truth was, the challenges faced by the two of them weren't even on the same level. Just like the domain masters in the primordial void space of the virtual universe company, even after cultivating for tens of thousands of years, they still couldn't withstand even a single blow from Luo Feng. Faced with such an insurmountable gap, how could one not feel disheartened? Luo Feng had been campaigning with the elite squad for nearly half a year. After one battle, while the team was busy collecting the spoils, a biological spaceship quietly approached. On board were not only 2 immortal-level powerhouses, but also a number of World Master-level members, which is 5 times more than those in Luo Feng's team. What was truly alarming was that Taiwo remained completely unaware, clearly indicating that their detection equipment was far inferior to the enemy's. Fortunately, Luo Feng, equipped with high-end detection devices, was the first to notice the enemy's presence. Using the inherited memories of the golden horned beast, he quickly identified the species and characteristics of the approaching spaceship. To avoid arousing suspicion, he pretended to scan the surroundings casually, disguising his discovery as a mere coincidence, and promptly alerted his teammates. Following Luo Feng's line of sight, Taiwo soon also sensed that several million kilometers away, enemy immortals were gathering divine power. He reacted quickly, unleashing his own immortal power in retaliation and decisively ordered a full retreat. Thanks to Luo Feng's timely warning, Taiwo was able to make the right call at the critical moment, allowing the team to narrowly avoid a deadly explosion of immortal divine power. The surge of power from the enemy instantly ignited the fury of veterans like Poison. Though fully aware of the strength disparity, they were still determined to fight to the death. Taiwo's eyes also burned with rage as he ordered Luo Feng and Rock to fight with all their might and ensure the complete annihilation of the enemy. In fact, of the elite squad's original members, only Taiwo, Poison, and 1 retired veteran remained. The rest had already perished in battle over the years. This was the brutal reality of war. After thousands of years of fighting, comrades perished one by one, and rookie soldiers filled the gaps. The squad they once knew had long since become unrecognizable. Especially for Poison, he could never let go of 7th Brother's death. In that fateful battle, 7th Brother was killed and devoured by the enemy while trying to save him. Poison had never forgotten this blood feud. It's worth mentioning that immortal divine power is like a human fingerprint in the real world, where each immortal's divine power is unique and impossible to replicate. Thus, as long as there was any prior contact, even a brief clash, veterans like Poison could instantly identify an enemy based on their divine power fluctuations. Now that his enemy stood before him, Poison was completely consumed by the flames of vengeance, losing all rationality. His body swelled into a towering giant, and he forcibly injected a vial of special potion, causing the strength of his plant-based auxiliary lifeform to surge wildly. Although he knew that overdosing on the potion would exceed the plant's limits and could cause severe damage or even permanent side effects, his eyes were filled with nothing but obsession for revenge. Countless vines surged like a tidal wave, furiously attacking the immortal enemy who had devoured seventh brother. At the same time, Taiwo lunged at the other immortal foe. However, the one poison faced was a fire-type immortal powerhouse. His plant-type lifeform lacked the powerful regenerative abilities of something like the Mo Yun Vine, so even with all his might, he was still being overpowered. The other team members, including the rookie Rock, were also struggling to fend off several World Master-level enemies, and the situation became extremely dangerous. Only Luo Feng remained composed amidst the encirclement, where he effortlessly struck down more than half of the World Master enemies in just a few seconds. Seeing that Luo Feng possessed immortal-level combat strength, the enemy panicked and immediately ordered a retreat. Sensing the enemy wavering, Taiwo quickly told Luo Feng to support poison, in case he continued fighting recklessly. After all, in a life-or-death battle, the biggest taboo is acting on impulse. Once one loses rationality, it's easy to make a fatal decision at a critical moment which could lead to total destruction. The divine sword Luo Feng wielded was as fast as lightning, making it impossible for the enemy to evade. In fact, since entering the extraterritorial battlefield, even when Luo Feng used the strongest form of the Yin-Shen armament, it was only corresponding to the 13th level of the Heavenly Bridge's law comprehension, but was already enough to contend with Immortal Army Lord-level foes. Now, having fused with a law realm close to the 15th level, the speed of the Yin-Shen sword could be described as teleportation. At such a level, which Immortal Army Lord could withstand a weapon that can teleport instantly? With the combined effort of Luo Feng and poison, the immortal enemy was finally slain. Luo Feng's sudden burst had already disrupted the enemy's rhythm, and losing a core immortal force caused the enemy formation to collapse completely. Immediately afterward, Luo Feng and poison rushed to support Taiwo. Once the three powerful warriors joined forces, the remaining immortal enemy had no way to escape. Seeing that the situation was hopeless, the immortal warrior decisively used a secret escape technique, choosing to sever his own arm to preserve his life. He forcibly abandoned part of his divine body, triggering a fierce divine energy explosion to cover his retreat. Although this left him severely injured and greatly weakened, he barely survived. The battle had already lasted several minutes. According to the survival rules on the battlefield, prolonged combat easily attracts enemy reinforcements, so a swift withdrawal was necessary. Taiwo immediately ordered everyone to sweep up the spoils and quickly leave the scene. However, they did not notice that within a seemingly ordinary ring lay a hidden spiritual imprint left by the enemy. This revenge victory invigorated poison and the others, as if a heavy burden in their hearts had finally been lifted. But they had no idea that an unprecedented crisis was about to descend upon them, and Luo Feng was soon to face the fated nemesis he must slay. Can you guess who that person is? Feel free to leave your guesses in the comments. That said, Luo Feng can now wield the Yin-Shen armament's strongest form with a law comprehension equivalent to the 15th level of the Heavenly Bridge. This practically means that below the level of Immortal Army Lord, Luo Feng is nearly unbeatable. In other words, if Dylan were to face him head-on, defeat would be inevitable. Even though Dylan is a powerful spiritual master, skilled in soul attacks, this would hardly change the outcome. Don't forget, Luo Feng's strength of consciousness has long surpassed that of most King Immortals, and his willpower is not inferior to any Immortal Army Lord. Against such a level of willpower, soul attacks from someone like Dylan simply cannot shake Luo Feng in the slightest. Among equals, as of now, aside from Hong, few could rival Luo Feng in terms of willpower. Unfortunately, in the original universe where Luo Feng resides, there are no truly willpower-based offensive secret techniques. Had he mastered such techniques earlier, even the automaton race or other soulless species would struggle to survive against his will-based attacks. In fact, whether a life form has a physical body or not, even intelligent beings like Babata possess clear consciousness. Willpower is the core that controls consciousness. Once willpower collapses, consciousness spirals out of control and disintegrates until total annihilation. In the future, before a catastrophic life and death calamity descends, Luo Feng will obtain a powerful secret technique centered on willpower, successfully master it at a critical moment, break through the disaster, and save billions of lives across the entire universe ocean. Well, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching this video. Wish you a wonderful day.